What we're going to be going over today is die stations and die anvils. On this Mark Andy 2200 we run, we have 2 die stations and 1 sheeter station. On our die stations, we have die anvils that are designed to cut pressure-sensitive material. They're softer, they're not hardened, and they're also supported. Now, we have 2 different stations. We have a supported and an unsupported. It's easy to tell the difference just by simply looking. The supported will have a drive roll under it. It actually drives the die anvil, and it keeps pressure all the way across so that when you put pressure, it keeps proper cutting tension throughout. On your die anvils on this particular press, as you can see, they're 73 tooth OD. That means they're about that big around, and when you get in here you can see, and that's big because down here on our sheeter station, which is a hardened anvil, these are softer anvils, this is a hardened anvil so that you can cut metal to metal and sheet. This anvil is a 99 tooth, it's oversized. The reason it's oversized is so that it can pull stock through the press when you're die cutting and you lose tension as far as sheeting or something of that nature. Another thing it does is it keeps in sync with what we talked about earlier with our print anvils. They're oversized as the press goes up. As this press goes up, this one's oversized also. One more case that you might would oversize an anvil even bigger than this is if I wanted to run a 20-point card stock. Then I would put in an oversized anvil a little bit bigger because it'll help eat up the slack. You can get in touch with somebody like Rotometrics and they can set you up for any type of converting you want to do of that nature. But one thing you want to remember is that this anvil is the unsupported. It has no drive roll under it. So this is your unsupported anvil compared to a supported anvil. As you start dealing with converting, and that's the only time, it has nothing to do with printing. When you start converting, it's important that you understand the setup of your press. If you don't, and you're not sure, because many presses will come in and all of the anvils will be the same tooth size, they won't be visibly different, but they'll be a little bit oversized on the sheeter anvil just to make up for the difference of that slack. If you move your anvils, take them out of place, get them misaligned or whatever, it can cause you problems. I highly recommend that if you're not familiar with your setup on your converting stations, that you get in touch with somebody like Rotometrics, have them come in, look at your situation, get everything mapped out for you, get it straightened up, and then get some order in it, make sure everybody in your plant's operating the correct way. It is important that you run the correct dies on the correct anvils. We'll be getting into how to do this correctly as we go on, but you know, anvils get tore up. Razor blades are the #1 killer to dies dropping on anvils. You get punch holes in them, things of that nature. Your gears wear out. Make sure that on your anvils they're in good shape, because if they're not, you are going to tear up your dies. Or if you don't use them properly, you're going to tear up your dies. So keep this in mind. Even though your press may be a little different in this, they all operate the same as they go in line. And if there's any questions about this, we might be able to answer them as we go on through this tape. As I was mentioning to you earlier, it's very important that you keep good, proper care of your die anvils. And probably more so important than that is that you understand what proper care is and how to inspect your die anvils to see if they are properly being cared for. It's very simple to do. I recommend you pull the die anvil out of your press before you do it. I'm going to show you right here real simply what you need to do. First off, start just by taking your finger and rubbing it right where your bearers go. You'll feel a difference in height level if there is any, or if there's some wear. Make sure that you're doing this on an anvil that's not a stepped anvil, because you will feel some difference there. Rub your finger all the way across, look for nicks, abrasions, things of that nature that could fall in there. And then make sure you inspect your gears. Your gears on the die anvil and on your drive support roll are hardened. The gears on your dies are not hardened. They're designed that way so that the gear on your die would wear out first. The gears are something that if there's metal shavings or something of that nature in there, eventually it will wear the gear out on your die anvil and cause you problems in the future. Probably the most important thing is that you know people are maintaining your die anvils, and you know that they're being done properly on a consistent basis. If you're not maintaining your die anvils properly, if you're not greasing your gears, if you're not greasing your bearings, you are going to have significantly more wear on your dies than someone who is. You know, we all hate to get in the middle of the job and the die go out. If you're not doing this, it will happen to you. There are basically three types of anvils that I'm going to cover for you real quick. The first one is your straight anvil, probably comes in your press. It's got an even surface all the way across. Most of your dies will be tooled to this, to the stock that you're going to want that die to cut. Your second one is a center step down anvil. It's designed to cut less deep. Your third one will be a center stepped up anvil, and it's designed to cut deeper. Without going into this too much, because you really need to be experienced before you start dealing with stepped anvils, I would recommend that you go to your local die dealer. Somebody like Rotometrics will come in, tell you what your difference variances are, set up a good program for you. Don't bring stepped anvils into your plant unless you have a program set up. We'll get into that a little bit into the future in our advanced series where you can learn about the proper programs set up for stepped anvils. But for now, what I would recommend is get in touch with your local die vendor, get them in there. They can set you up on something. It's something that I think will help you out if you use it properly. What I'm going to discuss now is a couple of things concerning the dies. The proper handling, the proper storage, the way you should prepare them for each run, how to keep up with the lifetime of it, different things of that. First thing I want to start with is the way this die comes to the press. As you can see, Rotometrics does a great job in giving you something to store dies in. They're stackable. They keep very good care of the dies. It's really hard to damage the die once it's put up. The handles make it easy to pick it up and carry. And then also you have your lockdowns. When you're putting a die up, it's important that you lock these down all the way tight every time. Time and time again, I'm on the students about them putting these up loose. Make sure you lock them down tight. That way this box will protect your dies. Probably the next important thing about this box on the outer surface of it is the way we categorize and die number our dies. Now, another thing that you might want to do, which we don't do at the school just because we're not a production facility full-fledged, but a trick I use as a manager is I'll take just a simple packing list holder and put on the side of my box. Put an index card in there, and every time that die is pulled, we'll write down who runs it, the amount of footage they ran, the pressure they ran it on, especially if you're using hydro jacks, and the footage they ran. That way we can keep up a good record of the die, how much it runs, and if you're a decent shop and your die vendor knows that you do this properly and you don't get the right life out of a die, odds are they're going to retool it or replace it for you, and it does happen. So if you keep up with your inventory correctly, you keep up with your impressions correctly, you'll find that in the future it sure does save you a lot of headache and downtime. Next thing I want to do is show you some of the proper ways of getting this die out. Now there's a couple of three ways. The way I'm going to show you is probably the most common on a 10-inch or less die because we don't need to put a crane in or nothing of that nature. And I just simply want to lift these up, flip it out, just let them drop in place all the way around, pull my top off. Now, I'm doing this on a bench here. Usually we'll be doing it up there. One thing before you go any further, make sure that your area is clean. Make sure that you're not going to set it on a block. Make sure that everything is set to handle this die. The edges on this die will cut you wide open or you will dull them. I don't wear any rings. I was a consultant for many years. You go in somebody's plant, you tear up their die, you buy it. So, you know, talk to your pressmen, make sure they understand how to handle this die. Now, when I first opened this die, and I'll look in here, there's a couple of things I noticed right off the bat. I have bubble wrap back around this die. This is important because it allows you to pull this die in and out without damaging it. Now, here again, you say, well, why are you so worried about rings? Well, you got to take the bubble wrap off before you put it in the press. So make sure you understand that. The second thing is my packing slip. Make sure that you keep up with it. It'll tell you everything you need to know about the die, what it's tooled to, when it was purchased, your serial number, your identification number. For instance, if you were wanting to reorder this die or something, you could simply pass this in and they could order exactly what you want. Now, Unloading this die, like I said, there's basically 3 ways. If it was a large die, there would be holes drilled in it for eye bolts, and you would be able to just bring the crane down and it would lift it right up. This is a small die, so I'll be able to pull it straight out. Now, one thing that I notice as a pressman, because I've operated with these quite a bit, is these 2 end plastic pieces here. One side is very flat, and the other side has indention. We try to put the indentions on the outside because that gives me a little bit of something to grip. As you can see, when I pull it out, it comes straight out. You can't do that with them flipped around. Now, that's a pretty simple way. This is a small die, but there are a lot of people in the industry who lift heavier dies and have to do it by hand, especially when it comes to women. So another way that we like to do it, and it's just as good to do it this way, is simply flipping the die box over. But before you flip the die box over and you have a die box of this nature, you'll want to remove all of these out of the way. Just pull your screw off, pull them out of the way. And this will help you if you have a hard time getting it out or something of that nature. Just hold it like so, hold these ends, roll it over. This way you're not lifting anything. You don't have to worry about that. Here again, make sure that you're not rolling it over on nothing. And then you can simply just lift the box up and you're ready to go. That's a very simple way. If you're having trouble getting the dies in and out, you'll find that whatever fits you personally best is what you'll be doing. But keep in mind, if you're going to lift these dies, and especially as they get bigger, you got to handle them like a baby. You can't be jerking them around. You can't be setting them anywhere. You really need to take care of them. And probably the last important thing, which is most people don't do for some reason, is when you are going to lift a die, most presses are not this low to the ground, so you're really coming up and going over and going in with a die. When you're doing this by hand, this is where your dies get damaged the most. On your bearers, they need to be clean. Inspect them before you put them in the press. On your gear, it needs to be in good condition. Inspect it before you put it on the press. And so many times I've heard people say, the die was fine when I put it up. You don't know what happened to that die since you've put it up. Inspect it before you go in the press. And then when you get ready to go into the press, make sure before you go lifting any die up over into this press that you have a back belt on. This is where the most common problems from lifting rolls and lifting dies that you hurt yourself in the back area with hernias and things of that nature. So make sure that you're doing everything properly that you can. I think you'll find these 3 different ways of putting the die out of the box very efficient and really relieves stress on the operator. All right, what we're going to be covering now is a couple of things dealing strictly with the die. Number 1, how to inspect the die properly, and number 2, how to set it up for putting in the press. First thing I want to go over, though, is the way we want to inspect the die. Now, it's difficult to inspect the die in these plastic things because we can't see the journals, we can't really deal with the gear or whatever. So what I like to do, here again, very carefully, if it's a big, heavy die, make sure that you're prepared for it. Leave the bubble wrap on during this whole time. Go ahead and remove this plastic. If it's a heavy die, do it one at a time. You can set your bearing.